Story number 1, Slight Violence, Blood, and Murder. I was 10 when the government separated me from my parents. The masked men threw me into a room. The bedroom, kitchen, and living room, if you can even call it that, were combined into one place. The bathroom was the only room that had its own area. There was a door that only men in uniforms would enter through. When they left, they would lock it. The only entertainment they gave us were books. Lots of books. They were mainly about the government and history, but there were some that were fiction. They also provided a pamphlet about the building and its history. Apparently, a guy named Jason Wilson made that place. He created it, if that any national emergency took place. You could hide. I look back at life, before I was trapped here. There wasn't anything that posed a threat, I think. But I've lived in that room for 5 years, so the past is a blur. I've studied that building for years, trying to find an escape. But they all came to a dead end, expected for one. There was a vent above the fridge. Maybe the vent would lead me to the outside world. I put in intense thought to this idea before trying. On the day of my escape, when the men left my room and locked the door, I climbed to the top of the fridge, and pry the door vent open. I shimmy my way through the narrow path. My body touched all 4 sides of the rectangle. I started to lose hope, until I saw a light ahead of me. I raced to the other vent, where the light was coming from, and quietly opened the door of the vent. I crawled into the bush that was in front of the vent and put the door vent back together, before checking the area. The large property had large structures, lined up in a row. I did find it strange that there were no guards in front of any of the buildings. But there could have been cameras. Either way, I tried to make myself as small as possible. After a few minutes later of crawling, I found an entrance to the outside world. The gate was wide open. It's as if the gate knew my intentions and agreed with them. I remember reading in the pamphlet that if you were able to escape, they wouldn't come and get you. I know why now. So, I didn't run in the aired field, but stared in horror. There were bodies that laid in a puddle of their blood. Some had gunshots that went through their heads and others had stab wounds. As I continued forward, and I found more bodies. My heart continued to sink into my stomach, for each lifeless body I saw. I didn't know what to do. I heard gunshots in the distance and ran for my life. I raced into a dark cave and hid in there. I've been in here for 10 years now. Sometimes, I see men in uniforms pacing outside the cave, but I never make a sound. I just write this letter for anyone who reads it. I don't know what happened to the world, but I know that it isn't the same. Story number 2, My House Haunted, or is it my crazy ex messing with me? I bought my first home back in 2016 on my own as a single young woman. I was so proud and excited, especially after finally leaving the toxic guy I was with the previous 5 years on and off. It was the fresh start I needed. Anyways, I moved in, just me, no roommate, and my ex had never been there. The house was a small 2-bedroom rancher built in the 50s but updated a bit. It had a dirt crawl space for storage and a huge fenced yard with 3 gates, smiley face, a metal gate, a small gate to get to the front door, and an old wooden gate to pull into the covered garage type area. I'm a nursing assistant, so I do a lot of night shifts, so after living in the house for a few weeks I get home from a night shift. It's 6 a.m. starting to get light outside, and I notice there is apples all over my front yard. Not apples off a tree though, store-bought apples with the stickers thrown all over my front yard. I was tired, kinda just brushed it off as kids messing around and went to sleep. A few weeks later I get off another night shift and everything seemed normal as most mornings, so I went to bed. I had a house sitter the weekend prior as I went on a girls' trip with some friends, so the house sitter had some people over to have drinks, which was totally fine, but they had left cans in my fire pit. When I woke up after sleeping that day, I went to let my dog outside to pee in the backyard, and all the cans as well as burnt chunks of wood were laid in a perfect circle around the outside of my fire pit. This seemed odd, but I just kinda thought it was some neighborhood kids messing around. Another few weeks goes by and I again get off a night shift. I pull in New York driveway and my heart sinks to see all my gates wide open. They were all closed and latched when I left. Something just felt off this time, but I was tired after a long shift and told myself not to get freaked out over stupid kids being annoying and went to sleep. That following weekend I had off and my cousin wanted to go to the movies, so I agreed and she picked me up. When I left, I put my dog in the house, locked the door and left the porch light on since it would be dark when I got back home. When I got back, I came home to find my dog outside, the door left unlocked and the porch light turned off. The watch for the light is inside. This time I was freaked out. I called New York Dad to come check the house for me. I was convinced someone had done this from the inside and that someone lives in my crawl space. But he came and checked and nothing to be found. I ended up getting a roommate to ease my mind a little and feel a little safer, so a guy from work was looking for a place, so I offered him a room and he accepted. He was a big dude, so I felt if it was someone messing with me they would think twice with him living there. I was wrong. One night I was home alone as my roommate was working night shift. I fell asleep on the couch watching a movie and I woke up to a missed call from a random number. I googled the number since I had never seen it before, and it was a number from one of those apps you could download to call or text anonymously from. So I tried calling it back, no answer. Then seconds later I get a text saying, "How's the movie?" I ask who this is and they say, "Who do you think this is?" I ask my roommate if he's messing with me and he replies from his normal number, "No, why?" So I tell the random number to cut it out, it isn't funny, but they continue to say things to me as if they can see me. I'm super creeped out and run to my window and close the blinds. They then begin to ask me to come outside to see who it is, and I run to my door and lock it. Then they say, "It's Corey." I didn't know a Corey. I ignored the texts. They eventually stopped and I waited till my roommate got home so I could sleep. Nothing ever happened again after that, and I still live in this house with my now husband. No explanation for any of it has ever come up. Woman shrugging, light skin tone. Story number 3. I recently traveled to Japan and was unbelievably excited as I've really never left home. I traveled from Tokyo to Osaka on the Shinkansen, I think that's right, the bullet train, and told my girlfriend that I had literally never felt safer. You could walk around at literally any time of night and feel like it was 2 in the afternoon. I don't live in a dangerous area here at home, but would still never be walking around in the middle of the night by myself. So when we got to Osaka it was late, and we decided to check into the new hotel and then walk around this park by the river. Everything was fine and normal until my girlfriend went into a public restroom. When I walked a bit past the restroom to sit on a bench, I started hearing these awful guttural noises. Like, I don't know, like what I'd imagine a raptor sobbing would sound like. Simultaneously I heard what I swear to God was bone crunching. There is absolutely no other way to describe the noise. It sounded like a gator crunching down on a deer. It was unnerving enough for me to turn around, and I swear to you I witnessed what had to have been some kind of crime behind me. There were trees, but this thing was in front of them, not even in them. This person was literally dripping head to toe in some sort of viscous liquid. And I mean head to toe. Its limbs were contorted like they were broken, and it was hunched over a body, or an animal or something, and I swear it was eating it. I am telling you, it looked like a human. It was 3 a.m. but this was a touristy park. It wasn't even that hidden. I froze, and it was dark, but I know it looked at me and it moved its neck so fast like a snap, and then he or she or whatever it smiled. I sprinted into the women's restroom, grabbed my girlfriend, pulled her out and ran. Didn't look back, nothing. I told people at a convenience store nearby, and maybe it was the language barrier, I have no idea, basically no response. But I told a nearby security or cop, I genuinely couldn't tell, and brought them over there, and nothing, gone. I have nobody to talk to about this, everyone keeps telling me it was wildlife, but I know what I saw. That was not wildlife, nothing moves like that. It was literally dripping. Someone, for the love of God, tell me what animal that could have possibly been. I left Osaka but am tempted to go back just to check the area again. I'm terrified, but also don't want to spend the rest of my life worried I'm crazy or terrified of something. What do I do? Story number 4, did I see a ghost? During the holiday season of 2022, I took a trip to visit my older sister. With every room already claimed by my other family members, I found myself sleeping on the living room couch. Our nightly routine involved gathering for a movie in the living room before everyone went to bed for the night. My niece had a cot set up that she would use to relax and eventually fall asleep, with my sister carrying her to her bedroom when it was time for bed. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to use the restroom and saw my younger sister fast asleep on the carpet beside me. To my surprise, my niece was also in the living room and in her cot, which was strange since my older sister usually carried her to the bedroom before turning in for the night. I did not think much of it and decided to make a quick trip to the restroom. Upon returning just a minute later, I found it odd that the cot was empty. I assumed my niece might have heard me getting up and went to my sister's room. The following morning, I inquired to my sister on why she had left my niece to sleep in the living room. My sister appeared confused, insisting she had carried her to bed as usual, like she has done every night since I arrived. I distinctly recalled seeing my niece in her cot during my 3 a.m. awakening, and doing a double take because I found it odd that she was still out there with me. This had left me wondering, did I see a ghost? Story number 5. I didn't find out about this story until recently. My best friends lived in an area by me. Well, when they moved in, my friend, who we will call John's dad found a book in the basement of their house. It contained things so disturbing he won't even tell anyone. After he read through it, he immediately burned the book. Basically what he explained was in it, which was only a portion, was that the past owners kept their children in the basement and made them work for who knows how long until they moved. Their thoughts on the world were also inside. He hasn't told a soul, not even his own wife, what else was in that book. Eventually John's dad moved to another state with the rest of his family. Makes me wonder. Was he trying to get away from the house? Every time I pass by the said house a shiver goes down my spine. To even think of what horrible things happened in that house without anyone knowing keeps me up at night. For me to stay in that house, I always felt weird and uncomfortable but couldn't put my finger on it. For the safety of the family and myself, I won't give out any more info on the place. Hopefully the book was made as a prank and the people who lived there before were just some dumb kids. All I can do is hope that it is all a lie. Story number 6, 2 guys. I, 16F, have been skateboarding ever since I was 13. Getting catcalled, shouted names, spat on, being hit and stalked was a lot for my young age, but I've learned to deal with it. One of my first ever encounters with a boy, 14M, was a great time. I was with my group and he was with a friend. Me being 13 at the time with a 14-year-old wasn't so bad, but I still felt uncomfortable. After a couple of hours, my group decided to drop off one of our friends and get some snacks. We all said bye and left the skate park. However, both guys followed us. The friend that was leaving ran to her house, which was understandable. The rest of us were creeped out but stood our choice to go to the shops. When we came out, I saw them. I told my group to skate away down the hill. We did. Before I left, I asked one of the boys to go away. They both attacked me. They dragged me with them behind the shop and started physically hitting me and sexually touching me. I screamed and cried. I tried to fight back. I got pushed down onto the floor and in front of me was my board. I grabbed onto it and knocked one of them around the head and ran off. However, because I was so weak, they still got to me. Luckily, my group came back and heard me screaming. We all ran off and I was with bruises on my face. I never saw them again. However, yesterday, now 16, I saw they same boys. I had made more friends and good relationships with boys. We were all there when I recognized them. I told my friends if we could leave and they said no. I felt uncomfortable and did not want to be there. Thankfully they left later. It was near 11 when we all came back to our hangout spot. We decided to go home and come back out tomorrow, but I don't want to. So I came home and went straight to bed. For some strange reason I woke up around 4 and looked around my room. There they were. At the end of my bed. I started panicking and crying. I immediately grabbed my phone and put the torch on. Nothing was there. I stayed up that entire night and it is now morning. I don't know if it was trauma or hallucinations. I'm really scared and don't know if I should come out again. Story number 7, The Family House is Haunted. When I was a child, my late uncle's chilling ghost stories had a way of seeping into my young mind, filling it with vivid images of the supernatural. His stories were so convincing that, as a kid, it was impossible not to believe in the eerie possibilities he presented. He really loved freaking out his little nieces and nephews. The centerpiece of many of my uncle's eerie narratives was my grandmother's old house, a relic from the past that stood a short distance up the road from the family cemetery. It had a history intertwined with the supernatural, making it the perfect setting for his stories. Several family members had passed away within its walls, including my grandfather and her 2 infant daughters, who had met untimely deaths. My grandmother often spoke of beings that visited her at the foot of her bed. Their nature a mystery, ghosts or angels, no one could say for sure. Most of the family dismissed her accounts as hallucinations, but my mother and I believed her, and my uncle frequently brought her visions to life in story form. Among the many stories I remember him telling, there were 2 in particular that left an indelible mark on my imagination: the tale of a mysterious light that wandered through the cemetery at the witching hour and a ghost that had visited multiple generations there. Over the years, however, I had 3 paranormal experiences of my own, all focused around that same house, making me wonder if perhaps my uncle's tales had been more than just spooky stories. My very first encounter happened on a weekend when we were visiting my grandma. I was just 7 or 8 years old at the time. I was sitting on the living room floor playing with toys. Some time later I looked at my mom and told her I had to go to the bathroom. When I reached the bathroom door, something caught the corner of my eye that totally freaked me out. I saw an apparition so shockingly real that I froze in place. Descending the staircase just beyond the bathroom door was someone wearing a pair of old, light-colored brown pants, accompanied by heavy brown work boots. I couldn't see above the waist and I knew no one was ever allowed to go upstairs. These were not the attire of the living, they were spectral, anachronistic remnants from another era, like something out of the 1920s or 1930s. My heart raced, and I struggled to process the impossible sight before me. The pants descended the stairs with an eerie, deliberate slowness, then stopped. Panic surged through me. I slammed the bathroom door shut and frantically looked for a place to hide. My heart was pounding relentlessly. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Could it be my late grandfather, who had passed away when my mother was just 9 years old? I didn't have long to think about it, before I noticed that the bathroom door wouldn't open. It had no lock, yet I found myself locked inside, desperately kicking and screaming for help. Minutes felt like hours as I fought to open the stubborn door, my cries for help going unheard. Strangely, the living room, where my parents, grandmother, and aunt were gathered, was just on the other side of the bathroom wall. But no one seemed to hear my frantic cries and screams. The door finally opened and I bolted out of there, running back to the living room. I shut the hallway door with such force that it interrupted my family's conversations. They looked at me puzzled by my sudden entrance. The freaky part is that no one had heard my screams or me pounding on the door. I never told anyone about my encounter, including my parents, because I didn't want to be thought of as some nutcase. Story number 8, The Family House is Haunted Part 2. My aunt, a stubborn old woman who lived alone in the old house, had become increasingly susceptible to falls. She resisted using her life alert device and seldom wore it around her neck. It was a daily source of worry for our family, and eventually, the day came when her other 2 sisters could no longer ignore the need for intervention. They made the difficult decision to admit her into a nursing home, an act she strongly opposed. My mother had spent several nights with her before the dreaded decision was made, hoping to prevent the inevitable move to the nursing home. But despite our best efforts, it was too late. My aunt was placed in the care of the facility, leaving her home empty. With my mother already staying there, I decided to move in, with my aunt's permission, as I felt uneasy about my mom being alone. A good friend of mine, ever helpful and eager to assist, joined me in the endeavor. To save money, my aunt graciously allowed us to use my grandmother's old house to store our belongings temporarily. It was a nostalgic place, one filled with memories of my family's past. However, it also harbored a reputation for being haunted, a fact that had fueled countless ghost stories over the years. As my friend carried the first set of boxes into the house, she suddenly dropped them and ran back to where I was standing next to my truck. Her face was as pale as a ghost, and she was breathing heavily, as though she had just sprinted a marathon. She stammered, "As soon as I entered through the back door and into the hallway, I heard 3 loud knocks. It gave me the heebie-jeebies." I raised an eyebrow, initially skeptical of her story. The house was old, and it had always been a hub for ghostly tales. Still, something about the intensity in her eyes made me reconsider. The look on her face seemed genuine, and I couldn't ignore the shiver that ran down my spine. After all, in a house with such a haunted reputation, anything was possible. We decided to proceed with the move, albeit with some caution. We continued to transfer our belongings into the house, but neither my mother nor I heard anything out of the ordinary. There were no mysterious knocks or unexplained sounds to be found. It was almost as if the ghosts, if they existed, were selective about their interactions, perhaps only revealing themselves to certain people. Over the following weeks, my friend continued to visit, offering her support and company. She helped with chores around the house, like cutting the grass and weeding the garden. One sunny afternoon, while I was preoccupied clearing away some overgrown brush, I noticed her demeanor change. Her complexion paled once again, and her eyes darted nervously around the yard. Concerned, I approached her and asked what was wrong. She hesitated before finally confessing, "I keep feeling like I'm being watched." And when I looked up at the second-story window, I saw a face. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a chill wash over me. This wasn't the first time she had been unnerved by the house's presence. She seemed genuinely frightened and on edge. The apparition she described scared the crap out of her, making her feel profoundly uncomfortable and unwelcome. After that day, my friend's visits became increasingly infrequent. She no longer came over to hang out, and when we met, it was always at a neutral location or through phone calls. The experiences she had in the house had left an indelible mark on her, and the apparitions that seemed to inhabit the old house had effectively driven her away. As the months passed, I never heard the strange knocks or witnessed any spectral faces myself, but the stories and encounters of those who had remained lingered in my memory. The house seemed to harbor secrets that were only known to a select few, a world of apparitions and unexplained phenomena that had kept the family's imagination alive for generations. I couldn't help but wonder if the ghosts were the lingering spirits of my grandparents or other, more enigmatic entities. Whatever the truth may be, the haunting of Grandma's house still remains a mystery. Story number 9, Weird experience I had visiting a secluded abandoned hospital. As the title says, here's my account of a weird experience me and 3 friends had while visiting this abandoned hospital that was sorta well known in my hometown when I was in high school. To give a clearer context, the abandoned hospital was in the middle of an even bigger abandoned site, which was the old military neighborhood. The whole place/sector was abandoned for a while, but basically all the location building, which were all identical, were all really well boarded up. However, the hospital itself was accessible through a few broken windows and such. We went there in the middle of the day in summer, broad daylight. It wasn't my first time there, and quite honestly it was not scary at all, more like adventurous and really interesting to explore/take pictures/etc. I emphasize this aspect because after a few times there, I could tell you there was absolutely no sense of dread/creepiness at all. It was really a nice place to chill. Which might have made us a little too comfortable, I guess. Anyways, we toured the hospital together, would split from time to time to explore some of the operation rooms and such, and we all regrouped in the center reception area at one point to hang out. The closer I was getting to the main central area, which was located near the biggest open/broken window bay, I noticed that I could hear a repetitive knocking sound that echoed outside. The closer I got to the windows, the clearer the sound got. When we were all together and pretty much ready to leave, my friend also pointed out that he could hear what sounded to him like hammer strikes, on a really constant beat. When he said that, I instantly recognized what I was hearing for the last 10 minutes or so. We got outside through the window bay, and the noise was even clearer and louder at this point. We were quite puzzled as I said earlier, the whole neighborhood was abandoned, only our car to be seen all around. We got a little skittish at this point and mainly didn't want it to get caught there since it was a restricted area after all. So we headed for the car, and when we turned the corner to the locative building in which we parked in front of, we all froze. There was a guy, hunched over or bent down at the very bottom of an exterior staircase leading to what I assume was the basement of the building. We could only see his back. The guy was wearing a clean-cut handyman overall, with a leather tool belt, and he was hammering the boarded-up door. When I saw him and locked eyes on his back, I felt an immense feeling of dread and general terror I rarely felt before, in broad daylight mind you. We were all creeped out and looking at each other. Didn't say a word, just raced to the car and left. I know it might not sound like much, and nothing that happened couldn't be explained, but being there and seeing the weird scene was really something else. It's a feeling that's hard to explain to someone who wasn't there. But I still remember this vividly, more than I'd like to.